Okay, so here I am. Got our new girl, Petra. Hi, Mama. This is gonna be our first time working on our training collar here. Okay, so she came in on her flat collar, which that's what we're connected to right now. I do have her on her new 6-foot leather leash here. I'm gonna go ahead and switch her over to her, I sized her up. She's on a small Premier martingale collar. Okay, we have it sized up correctly. It's above her flat collar, so her owner walks her on the flat collar. Okay, she pulls. She's manageable. Okay, physically, because she's not very strong, and she's kind of she's not very strong. Okay, so she's manageable, but we're gonna go ahead and start to teach her. Right. So this is gonna be the first time we're gonna get her on her Premier here. Good girl. So she checked in yesterday, and I was just bringing her out, moving her around on a rope lead. Okay, so she was pulling on it, but a couple little, good, here we go, this is great. Big issue that the owner says is jumping. Okay, so yeah, great, right? I just happened to just grab the treat. She jumped up. You saw me control a little with this hand, which is always why we want to have some leash management, okay, so that we can control those things, right? So I controlled it, bring her off like this. She sat down, I rewarded her, okay? So let's just start there then, okay? Let's just start there. Yes, good girl. So I went ahead and gave her a little leash reminder there, okay, to let her know not to jump, okay? And as she doesn't jump, I don't mind that I'm not looking for her to sit right now. I just don't want her to jump, right? So we'll control the jumping, and then when she refrains from jumping, we'll reward. Okay, so it's a two-part, right? It's always two-part. It's always control the unwanted behavior and then reward for the better decision, right? So control the jumping with the leash and then reward her for not jumping, okay? So when you do that, again, now we're being much more black and white with our dogs and letting them know, like, hey, this is what we don't want you to do. But when you make a good decision, that's what we want you to do, you get rewarded, right? So again, they're gonna learn a lot faster, yes, and things are gonna be a much more clearer that way when you tell them, like, hey, don't do that portion. But when you do the wanted behavior, you get rewarded instead of just rewarding wanted behavior. Okay, so again, we can apply different techniques across the board with different dogs, all right? Okay, so I'm also just constantly evaluating, right? Sometimes if I were to use the leash right there to just try to control the jumping, maybe they don't stop jumping, okay? Maybe they keep standing up, they keep fighting it, right? So I'm also just evaluating, like, hey, what does it take to stop her from jumping? Doesn't take much, okay? So we're combining a couple of exercises here where we're just controlling the jumping, but also working on, not impulsively just trying to take food out of my hand. That's essentially what's happening, right? So you always have to work with what the dog gives you, okay? I wasn't necessarily wanting to work on this. I was just grabbing my treat so that we can be ready to start to do some teaching, and then she's like, hey, give me that, okay? So, like this, right? Control that, okay? So it's not for her. Right? That's what we're trying to teach, right? Just because we have food in our hand doesn't necessarily mean it's for the dog, right? So we're gonna teach that. Good girl. Yes, good girl. Okay, just like that. So just hold that food there. Again, very different, right? Be very clear here that holding it here doesn't mean it's for her. Giving it to her means it's for her. Okay, good. Good, yay. So let's just get a couple reps in here. Control that. Okay. So not only is it the jumping, but the jumping is happening because of lack of impulse control. So that's essentially what we have to teach, right? Yeah, she doesn't have any impulse control. She pulls, she lunges, even with her crate training, she tries to bust out of the door. Yes, of course, she doesn't have any impulse control. So, yes. We have to develop that and build some understanding here. Essentially, this is part of teaching manners, right? This is bad manners, right? Jumping up and trying to take things out of your hands is bad manners, okay? So again, look, natural way for dogs. If I were another dog here, I would have snapped at her for doing that, right? Essentially like, this is my food, this is my bone, this is my toy. If you're just gonna try to jump and lunge and take that away from me, I'm going to snap at you. That's what dogs do, okay? So, and then the important part there is they don't reward each other, okay? If I were a dog and I snapped at her and told her, don't try to take my food, I'm not gonna then say, oh, okay, cool, now you're making a better decision, go ahead and have some. It doesn't work that way, right? We're just gonna hold them accountable to not take the food, okay? As, again, dog to dog interaction. So in reality, I always still feel like I'm, explaining or preaching, dogs themselves work off of a consequence-based system. If you try to take my food away from me, I'm gonna growl and snap at you. That's a consequence. And I'm not gonna reward you for not doing it, right? So one thing that I am gonna start to evaluate right now, the Premier collar. The Premier collar. Is it gonna be effective here in me having to teach her not to do something, right? Not to jump. So yes, I am pairing that with the reward side, right? If she makes a better decision, but like, how many times do I have to use the leash to try to control that, to teach her not to, right? If we have to overly use the leash to get the point across, then the tool is not correct. So notice that I'm not pulling her away, right? It's not tension and pulling her away from the food here. It's quick little jabs, mostly wrist, okay? And I want her to pull herself away, right? So we're just sending little signals there to not do that. There, better. Good girl. Again, don't worry about the sit. All we care about is just trying to control some of that advancement and that impulse control. Good. Good girl. Yay, good girl. There's a yawn. That's what we're looking for. The yawn means the brain is working, right? Brain is working. We're slowing her down. We're causing her to think, right? When a dog is impulsive and just trying to jump up and is like, oh, food, that's for me. They're not thinking, right? That's impulsiveness. They're going 100 miles an hour there. So when we start to slow them down and require them to start thinking, you're gonna get that yawn. So pay attention to that, okay? So, not the same thing as maybe a stress yawn. This is not like we're, taking her out into public and we're, trying to work on her insecurities around a trash truck, right? This is just teaching her impulse control around food. Yes, good girl. So sometimes we'll confuse those yawns with, oh my gosh, the dog is stressed. This is not a stressful situation. I'm sitting here with her on a leash in the yard, working on her jumping and her impulse control, okay? Yes, and she's getting rewarded, right? And she's eating the food. If the dog were stressed, she wouldn't eat the food. Okay, so always, again, a way to evaluate stress level in your dog is whether or not they take the treats or they take the food. If they normally would, but they don't in the situation or the environment, then they're a little insecure, right? They're a little stressed there. Yes, good girl. Good girl. So just to build on that a little, sometimes right here when you're saying like, hey, don't get the food, don't be so impulsive, they won't take it anymore. They're like, oh, okay, well, I don't want it all together now. They kind of shut down because they're being controlled. They're being required to, again, think, be a little more patient to stop themselves. So sometimes they're gonna shut down and be like, nope, I don't want it all together, okay? Yes, good girl, there's another yawn. That's a good girl, good girl. So we'll start to be pickier and pickier, okay? So like, obviously, yes, she's totally staring at it, okay? But I wanna limit how close she is here, right? Like, I don't want her to be, right up on it. Because like, essentially smelling it is the same thing. I need her to give me some space here, okay? Give me some space, give me some respect here around food, okay? This is huge, right? I've got a very young puppy that I'm working with privately. We just did this the other day, which is gonna drastically start to change the relationship between the owner and the puppy because the puppy's very, very pushy, okay? Got the needle baby teeth and just tearing up the owner's arms, okay? And really because, we don't have any impulse control around the food. The puppy's crazy around food. So we did this and all of a sudden, he started to think. Now we can really start to control some of that impulsive mouthing with the owner. If you can't, we need to develop this around food and things that the dog likes, and then we can start to apply it around other areas, right? So we did this food exercise. We required him to be a little more patient, stop being so impulsive, pulling out, which is towards something that is the extreme value to a dog. Food is the extreme value, right? So if we don't develop this around the extreme value to the dog, then we're not really building the skill, okay? It's impulse control around food, but I'm trying to develop patience and self-control and impulse control. I'm trying to develop skills. I'm just using food and what the dog holds, high value to, right? So this is not the same thing as just, telling your dog to sit and then feeding them their food bowl, right? Classic response, oh yeah, we make them sit for their food. This is not the same thing, okay? I'm not rewarding you for sitting. I'm rewarding you for understanding, like, okay, I got to give some space, right? I've got to give in to some limitations, right? So that's what's happening. There's limitations here. I've said, don't try to go to the food. Don't impulsively jump at my hand. That's a limit, right? I'm asking you to be patient, self-control, implement some impulse control, right? So this is all going to translate over to, of course, all of the rest of our obedience. And, one of the other issues that the owner's having is that, she takes off and she runs. She runs off, right? Impulse control. But again, it's all stemming from here, right? We show this exercise all the time. And this is my very first time, obviously, working with her in an actual, training session. And look at what we're focusing on. This has all the value. If we can get this down, everything else will be so much easier. This is part of your relationship with your dog, right? Respect, limitations, impulse control, manners, which once you have that, you're gonna be on your way to a well-behaved dog, okay? It's just in terms of you're gonna be able to control them a little bit more and give them more direction. And again, we'll work on the obedience, okay? That's different. Like, commands are different than manners, right? Good girl, good girl. Good, so we're gonna work that. That's great, okay? We're gonna keep working on that. But now, let's go ahead and get into some movement here, right? So we're gonna go on our straight line right here. We're gonna be making turns to our right. She's gonna be on our left side. Come on, yay! Good girl, we're gonna work on her following us. Yay, good girl. Good girl, come on. Good girl. So I'm obviously looking for her to, be not essentially on like a full loose leash, okay? But I am looking for her to follow. So if we're gonna get some of that jumping, I'm gonna go ahead and control some of the jumping still, okay? So that's why we're gonna make sure that we're gonna keep a shorter leash here, right? It's not tight, but it's short. So I have the food in my right hand. She's jumping at my left hand, right? So just control that, okay? Control that. Just as we would the other way, okay? We're gonna shut all those attempts of jumping down. Good, come on. Nope. And we're just gonna keep moving, okay? So her jumping gets controlled. Very important. I'm not gonna try to use the food there to stop her. We're going back to exactly how we were, right? Before, when we were just holding the food and I had to control the jumping to start with, okay? So right now, yes, I'm not focusing on rewarding her for not jumping, okay? There was no difference in being stationary to now moving, right? There was no difference. We just worked on her jumping stationary right there. So I'm not necessarily, again, I can tell she's smart. She's gonna pick this up quickly. I'm not really gonna backtrack right now and, start to reward for every time she doesn't jump now. I feel like we've sort of set the tone already, okay? Now I'm just carrying it into motion. Now we're walking and my expectation is, well, I worked on your jumping over there, so I expect us, come on, to not jump here. Okay? Good, come on. Good girl. Yay, good, come on. Yes, that's better, that's better. Good girl. Okay, come on. Good girl. Yay, good girl, yay. Okay, come on. So just walk on your straight line. making your pivot turns, right? So just turn straight back. Don't make a wide turn. Don't make a U-turn. Okay, just make a straight pivot turn back and forth like that. Yes, good girl. You see how she's turning with me, staying right with me as she's going to make those turns. I'm going to reward her, okay? We'll control the jumping, right? Jumping gets controlled. So we have to shut down all of those attempts, right? Shut down all of those attempts. Once you shut down all of those attempts, the dog is going to be like, oh my gosh, you know, I can't jump, right? Can't jump. Now, by shutting the attempts down, the leash is becoming, the collar is becoming engaged. When she jumps up, I use the leash to control it, just as I was when we were standing stationary, right? Good girl. So when I'm saying shut down attempts, that's what I mean, right? I don't mean, okay, like ignoring the jumping, okay? This is where, you know, again, dogs will wrap up on the leash. They try to manipulate the leash. They grab the leash in their mouth, right? So, good. We need to shut all that down so that way, shut the jumping down so it doesn't escalate to that, right? Where the dog's like, nope, I'm going to manipulate the leash here. I'm going to be the one that's in control, right? That's all that is. The dog is just trying to control your control. They don't want it. Good girl. Okay, come on, let's go. Yes, come on, let's go. Good girl. Nope. So there it is right there. You see that, right? And the leash goes loose again, right? I control the jumping. And then the leash goes loose again as soon as she stops. Okay? Good girl. Come on, let's go. So, seems like, well, let's test it. When I give her a little bit of energy, I was like, come on, let's go. She gets excited and that's where she jumps, right? So, okay, come on. Let's see if that gets her to jump. Let's try it right here. Okay, come on, let's go. Let's go. Yeah, you see, right? So, okay, come on, let's go doesn't mean jump, right? That's just her. She's just reacting to my energy, right? So, yeah, you know, overall, we're trying to teach our dogs overall ability to control themselves. You know, I want her to remain excited, but I don't want her to be losing so much patience and self-control that then she's, you know, jumping. Now, again, obviously she doesn't have the patience and self-control developed, so of course she's gonna lose it, right? Okay, come on, let's go, come on. Yeah, that's better, right? So when I say, okay, come on, let's go, and she just prances up forward and doesn't jump, that's a reward, right? Okay, come on, let's go, come on. Right there, right? Good girl, good girl. So essentially I'm testing her, right? Before I said, okay, come on, let's go. And she started to jump, which required me to control her. And as we are, okay, come on, let's go. Yeah, adding that in, and she's learning like, oh, okay, I can get excited. He just doesn't want me to jump up at him. When she makes that decision, we can go ahead and reward, right? Come on, let's go, come on. Good girl. Okay, come on, let's go. So jumping, control with the leash, right? Let's go forward. Okay, come on, let's go. Yes, good girl, good girl. Okay, come on, let's go. Good. So we can go down a whole rabbit hole on breaking down, you know, dog's excitement level here, okay? Because that's essentially what that is. And so a lot of the times, you know, when I'm breaking down, understanding, and working with owners, it's, well, you know, it's basically they have a hard time controlling the dog's excitement level, right? And so then they end up refraining, okay? Which, again, we'll go down a whole rabbit hole. We end up refraining from a lot of our own sort of words and energy and our own wants or doing things because it causes the dog to act a certain way, right? That's completely wrong. It's like, let's stop doing things that would cause the dog to fail, okay, or to behave a certain way. Instead, let's teach the dog, okay? So, again, we'll go, this will take hours to break down because I have so many examples of people like, oh yeah, well, we don't do this anymore because, you know, the dog just goes bonkers. So we've removed doing that altogether, or we've removed this from the picture. Good girl. And instead I said, well, that's a bummer. Now you can't do those things because you haven't actually just taught the dog the behavior you're looking for, right? Okay, come on, let's go. Come on. Yes, right? So look, the answer is, okay, teach your dog. That's the answer. The answer is not remove things so that the behavior doesn't happen. The answer is leave those things there and teach your dog the understanding. Okay? Come on. Good girl. This is really good. Yes. That's really good. Good. So, again, she's very motivated. She's going to be a smart dog. She's got a lot of breeds mixed in her. The owner did give us her breed breakdown. She's got a lot of smart breeds in her. She's going to pick this stuff up very quickly. We're going to keep building on this here, but impulse control, some patience, some self-control, limitations, introducing her premier collar, teaching her to follow and take direction. Guys, there's so many things, okay? So when we're like, oh yeah, she knows a little sit, she knows a little down, you know, that's so elementary level, okay? We're trying to go, again, layers deep here and try to understand how to really develop our dog's skills, okay? I want your dog to be well-versed and have a lot of skills and understand actually what you're looking for, right? You're not just looking for your dog to sit, okay? Like, sitting doesn't stop the jumping. You want your dog to understand impulse control, patience, self-control, limitations, mind the manners that you are requiring from them, right? So that's essentially what we're doing. We're teaching manners, and then we're going to be holding accountable for those manners that we taught, right? Good girl. Good girl, sweet girl. Sweet girl. She's got some cool wiry hair here. Yeah, good. So we're going to eventually turn this into our, food exercise where we're throwing it on the ground because we were already holding the food, right? So let's test here. Yes, that's a good girl. Then we'll eventually start to throw it. Because if we've already developed it here, then there's no difference on us throwing it on the ground and expecting her not to impulsively pull out and get it. That's a good girl. Yes, yes, good girl. So we're going to end this. We're going to have a little play session. And then we're going to build on this during our next session. Good girl. Okay, let's go. So even there, okay? So we may be trying to end, but look, anytime she's on a leash, I'm going to be expecting this. So I may not have my food ready to sort of, reward her for making a better decision when I had to stop her from jumping, but I'm still going to control the jumping, right? This is why it's huge to be consistent, right? We always hear that, be consistent. I can't only start requiring these things from her in our 10-minute training session. What about the rest of the time? That's something that you absolutely have to think about, okay? So if I ask someone, oh, cool, like how much time do you spend working with your dog a day? Most of the time, it's like on the walk, right? Most of the time it's, oh yeah, we work on it when we're on a walk. A 30-minute walk, a 20-minute walk, okay? But then the idea is like, well, what are you doing for the other, 23 and a half hours in the day with the dog? Obviously, a portion of that is sleeping, but you get the idea, okay? So if you're awake for 16 hours, okay, and 30 minutes is spent, working on the dog on the walk, training, then what are you doing for the other 15 and a half hours with the dog? That's why we have problems, because for those 15 and a half hours, we're not holding them accountable. Okay, so obviously very hard to hold accountable if you haven't taught, right? It's like your job, your work, you had to be taught what to do and to do your job, and then you were held accountable, right? So we have to do the teaching, and then we need to hold accountable, but it needs to be across the board. It can't just be for the short 5, 10, 15-minute training session, and then the rest of the time, your dog is allowed to do whatever they want, and you're not holding them accountable. Your relationship is being developed in that manner. It's all relationship, right? So our relationship is being developed in this manner. So even as I'm saying, the session ended, I said, okay, good girl, let's go. She was like, yes, time to jump again, right? So I gotta hold accountable anytime they are on the leash, at least for this training program, right? I'm not raising these dogs, right? Cynthia and I are not raising the dogs. They're coming through our program and we're developing these skills, okay? So then you guys, right, their owners, can raise them and hold them accountable. But you can't pick and choose when you want to hold them accountable. This is where people who have great success seem to figure this out, right? They're structured and they hold their dog accountable across the board. Okay, because it's very easy for a dog to say like, whoa, you most of the time you hold me accountable, but here and here and here you don't, So you're always gonna have problems in here and here and here, which then are going to roll over to the other areas. They're always gonna challenge because they're like, well, sometimes you let me, get away with it and other times you don't. So I'm gonna see if I can. Okay, so that was great. Okay, as we try to end that, that's what she gave us. So a great example of still holding them accountable, even though we've sort of ended the session. She's on a leash, and we're gonna hold her accountable for that impulse control and pulling and jumping all of the time now because we've already started to teach. Even there. Good. Okay, Mama, let's end it. Okay.